you reinventors. This is Lesley Jane Seymour, and I'm the founder of this podcast and of coveyclub.com, where you can find everything reinvention. Whatever you might want, we have free guides, free downloads, free articles, free essays, everything to inspire you and to keep you going in your reinvention. And remember, it's never too late to reinvent. You can do it. I can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. Let's put it that way. I was thrown out there into reinvention, not by my choice, but because my magazine folded, which was More Magazine. And I created Covey Club so that you don't have to go through what I went through. So today I have for you a wonderful person who has many types of reinventions. But what I love is really her last reinvention was kind of accidental, and it ended up reinventing her love life as well. And so a lot of you I know are trying to figure out love in the second half. And you never know. Like, she took a job on a boat, and who knew just she says it was her, she was meant to be there with the love of her life after being divorced before. So let me tell you a little bit about Niamh McAnally, and is an Irish-born best-selling author, keynote, and corporate speaker, former TV director, and youngest daughter of the late BAFTA award-winning actor Ray McAnally and actor Ronnie Masterson. Niamh has traveled all over the world and lived and worked as a volunteer in many island nations in the Caribbean and the South Pacific. And yes, she does have wanderlust. And yes, she went with it. And yes, she's lived such an interesting life. And she has a new book out, which is called Following Sunshine, A Voyage Around the Mind, Around the World, and Around the Heart. Check it out. I think it'll be really inspirational for you. And also, what's really exciting is she's going to do a class for us, which is called Saving Money by Traveling the World as a Volunteer, Thursday, October 17th at 6 p.m. Even if you're not a member of Covey Club, you can come over and buy a ticket and join us in the class. I think you'll really enjoy it. She's very inspirational. And whether you're thinking of reinventing just your career or you're reinventing your love life as well, she's got a great story for you. So thank you so much for joining us. And here is Niamh. Niamh, so wonderful to have you here. I've not had a story like yours, so I'm really excited.
Lovely to meet you, Lesley. Delighted to be here with everybody.
Great. So let's start a little bit with your background. Where did you grow up? Because you didn't grow up here, right?
No, no. I grew up in Ireland and I was the youngest daughter of two actors, and they were both freelance actors. So that really helped
Ooh,
me understand
wow.
that change is inevitable, and you keep, in fact, it was kind of the genesis of my reinventions over and over again.
Because they are constantly, but they're moving. I forget who I was just reading. Oh, I was reading about Al Pacino. They had
Uh,
a excerpt, I guess, from a book coming up, and about how his life was just always, hit and miss, hit and miss. This is coming, that's coming, you're moving. So did that set you up for a good feeling for reinvention?
I think it did. I think it taught me that change is inevitable and that you got to be ready for the next kind of reinvention, if you like. And I also grew up by the sea in Ireland on Dublin Bay, so that was also my big driving force. So the water and the change, it was like a ticket to reinvention.
Wow. So what did you start out doing? What kind of schooling did you have, and what did you start out doing?
So the first thing I did was I went to Paris right after I finished school at 17. I went to live in Paris so that I could kind of get that diversity. And I loved oh my goodness, living in Paris was amazing. And also I lived with a family. So I was like a jeune fille au pair. So I was like a
Oh,
live-in
fabulous.
nanny. Yeah.
Oh,
And that
fab.
kind of really set me up, the difference between going to somewhere as a tourist as opposed to living in the community. And you get to understand the creed, the culture, everything. And that's when I knew in order for me to keep traveling, I want to travel as either a volunteer or somebody in the community rather than straight off a tourist bus.
Right. And so what did you do after that?
So I actually went back to Ireland and I started into the theatre and television, which was kind of, an obvious career path, if you like, because I was obviously raised in that kind of creative environment. And I worked in television for a number of years. And then I actually left it all. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go do some of the volunteer travel I wanted to do. So I started off in Belize in 93 on a coral reef project. And from there on, it just became one thing after another. Some volunteer work down in Kenya with the dolphins, some in Vanuatu with turtles.
Wow.
And yeah, my whole life has been around the water. And now I'm a writer and branded as the writer on the water, which kind of makes sense.
And were you an environmentalist? Did you study environmental science or you just kind of got into it or?
No, I didn't. I started off actually learning how to scuba dive in Ireland, and then I became a scuba instructor, and I was made the diving officer on this coral reef protection program over in Belize. I was there for about 4 months, and it was when they were setting up their marine sanctuary. So I learned a little bit about it, but I certainly didn't study biology or anything like that in school. So it was learn as you go. So most of my reinventions, I think I've had 5 careers over 5 different industries now. All of them have been kind of learn on the job.
Interesting. So let's talk about those careers. So what was the first career that you had? And then just go rapidly through them. And then we
Oh,
want to talk about your middle-age homelessness because how did that happen?
you're right. So yeah, so it was originally television and film. I started as an actress and then went into director. I was a TV director, and then from there went to become a scuba instructor and did that for a number of years. And then I was based in Florida for a while. And I said, "Oh, I got to start. You can make an $8 an hour job here in Florida, but really, it's time to start moving forward." So I ended up starting a business in retirement finances and health insurance, long-term care insurance, which I actually still hold the license for that as well here in Florida. And from there, I ended up in hotel management and started living on this little island called Sark in the UK Channel Islands, about 3.5 miles long, mile and a half wide. Idyllic, absolutely in nature. Loved it. And then when that hotel shut, I ended up taking a year out to volunteer travel around the world. And at the end of the year, I found one final project, which was to crew for a solo sailor to bring his boat from Florida to the Bahamas. And I ended up, instead of a 1 month, living on the boat for 6 years and became the writer on the water.
Oh my, but you were always writing? Was this sort of a soul
I,
project always? Were you always a writer?
Yeah, I was wrote from the very young age. I was always writing, but I didn't become like full-time writer until about 8 years ago, until I started living on the sailboat. And I showed Gary, who is now my husband, I showed him one of my first short stories, and he said, "Oh my goodness, you need to do this for real, full time." And that's when we started full time at
So
it.
so the guy who you ended up on the boat with for 6 years became your husband?
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Oh,
mean,
hilarious.
there's a line in the book where it says like he was allergic to pecans and relationships. And so it took a number of years. It was like we were 4 years together on the boat. And then he popped the question one Thanksgiving on the deck in sunset. It was just amazing.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So, talk a little bit about how did you get published so early and where were you published? Because a lot of people listening are wannabe writers or they are professional writers. I come from a writing background. So a lot of people tend to be from that background. A lot of people who want to get published and don't know how. Can you talk a little bit about how that happened?
Sure. It's a long journey, as I'm sure you're aware, getting, especially book publishing, you try and get an agent. I got 2 different agents in Ireland, and my second book was actually sold first, called Flares Up, A Story Bigger Than the Atlantic. And it's a true story about 2 guys who rowed across the Atlantic Ocean. And my
Road, ROWED.
ROWED in a 20-foot wooden boat. And we were on the island of Antigua at the time when they came ashore. And I took this amazing photograph of their moment of triumph, which actually went on to become the front cover. And they found out I was a writer. And I said, "I'll write the story so long as it's about why you did it, what drove you, as opposed to, how to do it." And it's, dives deep into their psychology and their
Oh,
family background. It's quite a moving story. I was like
okay.
flabbergasted. I got to write it. So in the
Okay.
meantime, I had already written my memoir, which is now called Following Sunshine, but that didn't get picked up initially. So then I was a year or so working with Flares Up. And then on the back end of that, I went back to it, brought it up to date through COVID. And then it just got picked up here from a US publisher. And
The
I,
Following Sunshine?
Following Sunshine, yeah, that's just come out actually in September.
Okay.
So So that was an 8 years from line one to publication was 8 years.
Eight
So I mean,
years.
8
Wow.
years.
Okay.
Yeah. So it is a long process. You can go a couple of different ways nowadays. You can either go the agent and the traditional publishing route. There's some traditional published small presses actually that will take an unsolicited manuscript directly without having to go through an agent, which is
Oh,
fantastic.
interesting.
Yes,
And
in
how do
fact,
you find those? Do you Google
yeah,
unsolicited
absolutely. You could,
manuscripts?
yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things I've ended up in, both of my books are published through smaller presses. And what is really wonderful about that is they are nimble and they've got their finger on the pulse of the whole digital world in publishing now as well. And they understand the algorithms and what drives book sales and things like that. And you just send in your like query initially, which may be a little sample of your writing. And if they then ask for the full manuscript, then you're off to the races if they accept it. And but even
Wow.
from that, just for everybody to understand, even from a small publisher accepting your book, it's about a year's length of process
Right.
from
That's my
signing the contract.
understanding.
Yeah, it's
Right.
about normal.
Right.
So, and one of the things while you're waiting, I would suggest to people is put that book out of your mind, go start something else, write on another project,
Mm.
whatever you want to do, and don't, because it's going to take 2 or 3 months for somebody to read it and get back to you
Mm-hmm.
anyway,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's a
And
very
you'll
slow
probably,
journey.
did you have to do a lot of revises?
I did. I mean, once I get it back. Now, what I always recommend is you go to a developmental editor first before you even submit. Make sure you can edit your best, but make sure there's another set of eyes that are professionally trained and know
Always.
what they're doing, you know?
Always.
Because when
Yeah.
my stuff comes back from the editor for the first 2 days, I know I'm going to stomp around, go, oh, I got to fix this and fix that. And then eventually, after like 2 days, I kind of go, well, he might have a point here. And then I realize he's always right.
Yeah, well, you can never, I mean, this is the thing that I learned editing magazines for 40 years is that you can never be your best editor. You just
Mm-mm,
aren't. You think you're saying something and somebody else reading it, it's just another eyes. I
mm-mm,
hate to publish anything without someone reading it because I'm like, well, I thought I said that. And they're like, that's not what I heard. And you
mm-hmm.
just have to be open to the fact that, even if you believe you're really good at what you do, sometimes it doesn't come across. Sometimes we say things we think people understand and they don't.
Right, exactly. And I have a tendency to underwrite because, a lot of people overwrite and it's kind
Most
of like
people
it.
overwrite.
Right, and it's insulting to the intelligence of the reader. So as a backdrop to that, I end up underwriting sometimes, letting, there's that I remember Johnny Geller, one of the agents out of London, was saying that, the great writing is when you leave space between the lines for the reader to inhabit. Well, sometimes I leave too large of an open
He
field.
left a paragraph in
Yeah,
between each line.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that's where an editor really tells me, yeah, I couldn't make the leap.
So you're kind of we've had a lot of these sort of like go with the flow kind of reinventors, right? Like what is it in your personality? Because for me, like that would be death. Like I like the idea of just like, I don't know where I'm going to be. I'm going to try this. I might try that. Then some people listening are like, I have to know where I'm going Monday.
Right.
Is that part of your personality? Is that part of growing up with parents who are actors? Or they like just like, I don't know what I'm doing Monday. Oh, look, Monday afternoon, I got blah, blah, blah. Is that why you're kind of go with the flow? Or is that something you've learned? Or is it just uh, how come you don't have to know Monday morning at 10 where you are?
Well, on the shorter scale, yes, I do. I do kind of plan out my week, if you like.
Right.
But part of it is what I try and do is just okay. There's change coming. Stop, breathe, then think, and then take action. So I kind of go through that sort of three-step process in order to decide what's next. And I think for everybody, when you get into these situations where you do have a major change, it's very helpful just to take that moment and stop. And also to try and figure out what is your passion? What are you passionate about?
Mm.
And to me, a lot of people don't they think they know what it is, but they're not sure. And
Yes.
my
Correct.
my question to everybody then is, okay, what if you were to wake up one morning, all your needs are taken care of, your food bills, your house, everything, all the family's taken care of, pets, animals, everybody. What is it if somebody comes into your room and say, it's a beautiful day, what would you like to do today? Whatever that first thing that comes into your mind is, that's usually where most of your passion lies.
Oh, I love
And
that. That's a great exercise.
Right. And then what you can do with that is like, okay, if it's something where you want to change jobs, maybe, is that something I can make a living doing? If it is, great. What is the next baby step to get myself either qualified or in the right, environment to move that forward? Or if it's not something I can make a living at, okay, that can be a great hobby for me, which will uplift me and keep me going. And then let's see, what is there a side, hustle to that? Not a hustle, but you know what I mean? There's another in the Venn diagram, let's say, what's another circle that's in that environment that would still feel me, put me in that place. And I think that's what I've managed to do all the time is like, if it makes me tick, I'm going to be the best I can be at it.
Mm, absolutely. So there are two things I'm interested in here when you're talking about charts are liberating journey through the middle age from homelessness to a captivating global quest to ultimately finding a profound and life-changing love. There are two important things for us to cover here. One is how did the homelessness occur and how did you get out of that and why did it occur? And
So
then
that
we wanna talk about the love part after, because there are an awful lot of people listening who are,
Mhm.
middle-aged, they either
Mhm.
never got found a partner or they're in, a divorce or widowhood or whatever. So let's start with that because I wanna talk about that, because a
Mhm.
lot of people are very frustrated.
Mhm.
So, middle-age homelessness, what was that and how did that happen?
Well, the two things are kind of wrapped into one. I was divorced. I was rattling around in America trying to find my niche. What was it? I had done a project down in Fiji. I had come back from there. I was driving to Los Angeles. And I think, oh my God, the comparison. People were grumpy on the freeways in LA. And I'd just been with people who were
Yeah.
intrinsically happy, making like a fraction of the money. And I said, I actually said, get me on an island without cars. And I went home and I Googled it and I came up with three. And one of them was Sark in the Channel Islands, the UK. And at the end, stayed 5 years. And at the end of those 5 years, they closed the hotel. So I was living in staff accommodation. I had no car because it was a car with an island without cars, no airports. It was just accessible by ferry, totally up my street. But now here I was mid 50s, and I was like, okay, now what? And that's when I said hospitality is, most people who have worked in it know, it's a very long, arduous kind of 24/7 kind of a job, especially in management. And so I said, I'm taking time out. I'm going to start volunteering because I was mid 50s. At one point after the divorce, I thought, this is it. What's the point in living anymore? I wasn't suicidal per se, but I couldn't see the point. Nothing would lift me up. And then eventually I decided I got to start thinking of my life outside of myself. It has to be more than me. And as it turns out, I don't have children from the first marriage. It didn't work out. And so it was like, what is my legacy going to be? And so that's when I started into like full-time volunteering and traveling as a volunteer. And that's what happened as a result of becoming homeless, if you like, and nowhere to go. And I had already been in Sark with literally a backpack of items. That was it. That's all I owned because I'd sold down. I think twice I've sold down to like two suitcases kind of thing
Oh my
to
goodness.
reinvent. Yeah, I've done it twice. Once going over to
Wow.
America and another one coming back from. Um, and letting go and learning to live in minimalism, and you travel lighter, you feel lighter. I'm not saying now, I mean, I have stuff now again, probably more than I need, but that really helped me move lighter through the world. And then, as I said, I ended up on that final project, which was to crew on the sailboat. And interestingly enough, I wasn't looking for a relationship. He was not looking for a relationship. In fact, after the first 24 hours we were at sea, we had some problems. We had to turn back to America. And he looked at me and he said, you're not coming back, are you? And I went, no, why would I? Like, we were out there and the engine quit and everything, and we were bobbing around and it was dark and all that stuff. And he came up with what turned out to be the best pickup line ever. He said, are you going to let one night of bad sailing ruin an entire month? And we got on. We were living in a 24/7 in a 40-foot space with no internet and very rarely cell service. So guess what? We ended up talking, and we got to understand each other from a very profound level and realized we had a deep, deep bond. And it was a friendship that grew into a spark of a romance and then into a deep love. And now I know this is the human I was always meant to meet. And I am so blessed,
And
so
how did
grateful.
you find that job? Was it how did it come about? A friend of a friend, or did you find it in
That
in a
was That was through a
Want ad?
website. Yeah, absolutely. That's the funny thing about the whole thing is while I was doing all these volunteer projects, I had found them through a website called workaway.info. And the premise there is it connects hosts and would-be volunteers, and you work 5 hours a day, 5 days a week in exchange for food and lodging, which really helped me out of the bind I was in,
Wow.
right? All I needed was the money to get from A to B. And I had saved some money while I was living on the island. And, I didn't have to feed myself and I didn't, have to worry about a roof over my head. So that really got me through. And I've still since kind of developed this concept that even in our own neighborhoods, we could do that because there's, degrees of homelessness. There's some people who are just like between situations, let's say, as opposed to, long-term situations on the streets. And we could all, if we had that spare bedroom and we needed some help around the house or something like that, we could house somebody in that interim and get them on their feet, especially if they're only working 5 hours a day. They've got time to do interviews and get going and see the area. And also you can, bring somebody from another culture, maybe exchange language learning, all that kind of stuff. That's just wide open.
That's really interesting. That's a really interesting idea for a lot of women who might be listening to this, who have a house. They have a lot of extra bedrooms. They're empty nest. They're kind of lonely. They might be divorced, widowed, whatever, or they just might like that companionship. That's a great thing to offer up. That's a
Hmm.
really interesting thing to make I mean, we did that with au pairs. So we would have that
Hmm.
international, sort of exposure for many, many years to our kids and our family. And it was wonderful, and everybody who came to live with us became part of our family
Yeah.
long term, still
Yeah.
to this day.
Yeah, yeah, and it opens your mind, and you're just you think about people and you embrace people, and just because people do things differently in a different culture, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just different,
Different.
Yeah.
To me, that's what makes life interesting.
Hmm.
I'm a person who gets bored easily, so I like new stuff, different stuff. That's
Hmm.
just I'm always exploring what's new and that just keeps me interested. And I think it also keeps you young.
Yeah, and that's the variety, and that's what drove me as well. And that variety and liking things to be different all the time really helps you play into reinventing yourself because you don't get stuck in a narrow street. You kind of go, well, what else is out there? What else could I be doing? What else? What other little areas in my life am I talented at, or that I enjoy doing? It doesn't have to be whatever that straight career path was.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things as you get older, and I'd love to hear what you think, is staying curious. If
Hmm.
you're
Hmm.
constantly curious and you're constantly in learning mode, you're
Hmm.
going to meet new people, you're going to find new things you like, you're going to constantly grow. You will never be sort of a boring person stuck in one spot. I mean, what do you think about? Are you curious? I bet you are.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've got like 5 habits that you should develop in order to like make something like travel, opportunity for personal growth. And number one on that list is curiosity. Number two is adaptability. Three is minimalism. Four is open-mindedness. And
Mm.
five is gratitude, which obviously ties everything up once we kind of root ourselves in gratitude. But curiosity, like how does that work? Why does that work that way? Why do people think this way? What can I see over there? So yeah, I'm always curious.
And what can you learn? Yeah,
What can you learn?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so if that's one of the most important things about reinvention, what about those sort of this wanderlust? I know a lot of people get wanderlust, but they're afraid to act on it, or they're afraid, that they can't do it because of their obligations or whatever. I mean, obviously you've been wanderlusting your whole life, but you must have met the other type of person who would benefit really well from that. How do you encourage them to let go of some stuff and just try it?
I think for me, I think the easiest way to do it is to understand living in the now and living in the present moment. Because I think a lot of our fears come from our anxiety when we project ourselves into the future. What if this went wrong? What if that went wrong? And I think the other part about it, and certainly for me, when I got on that sailboat, my family and friends says, "You are crazy. You're going to go to sea with somebody you've never met. How do you know they're not an axe murderer?" Right?
Right, right.
Right. So
What your mother would have said, right?
right, exactly. And so, but then if you allow other people's fears for you infect you, that'll kind of keep you stuck. And I think that's the thing is we have to stand in our own power, but we also have to stand in the now. I had an example in Vietnam one time where I was in this car, didn't understand the language. I was actually leaving the country at the time, and the driver got pulled off out of the car and brought behind these trees where I guess a big police thing and didn't look very cool. And I'm sitting in the car like, and my brain tried to get anxious, and I thought, hang on a second, Niamh, you're sitting in a car. That's you've done that before. There's no threat yet, you know. Yeah, it's getting a bit hot because the air conditioning's off right now, and so breathe moment by moment by moment. And I think if you stay in the present moment, that fear is not as consuming. And so anything that you try to do in terms of reinventing yourself is each step, you don't do it overnight in one big jump
No.
necessarily.
Right.
So
Right.
it's like, what is the baby step next to that? And is that fearful? No, that's easy. It means just getting up and putting my clothes on and maybe buying a plane ticket. Have I bought a plane ticket before? Yes, I have. Is that hard? No, it's not. So I think that is the real key, is to try and stay present in the moment.
And what are your so do you have any sort of tips and tricks for older women traveling alone if they want to go out and travel alone? I mean, I think people are nervous about that.
I absolutely. And I mean, I did travel a lot of places on my, well, I did that whole year by myself. And in my age group, yes, you are very conscious and the vulnerability of being a woman alone out there. The easiest part is usually the daytime. It's the evening time into the nighttime that I found difficult, because people are always wandering around. You don't know who's, where. Oh, somebody might be in the bathroom, that kind of thing. Um, I researched countries that would be more difficult, first of all, for a female traveling alone, and kind of stay clear of that areas. So I would do some research there. But what I did in the daytime was easy enough, and you can join big groups that are moving around as well. But in the evening time, if I'd either eat like take away and eat in my room or wherever I was at, or in terms of volunteering, at least you're not by yourself. You're with a family, you're safe and secure in that way. But if I ended up having to go into a restaurant, I always brought a notebook with me and I would take a bite and then I'd make a little note. And people used to think I was a food critic,
Ah,
which and
that's really funny.
I would like I wonder how this tastes. No, 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 right. And that kind of protected me. Or I'd eat from food trucks, and I'd stay safe. If I was ever having to meet somebody, you can certainly do this in America. I would meet them either at an ATM machine, in front of an ATM machine, because there's a camera there the whole time. So at least,
Very
you're
wise.
right, you're last seen wearing, um,
Right.
and I was talking to my husband the other day. I said, maybe if I was in America, I'd go one step further and I'd make it in front of a post office. Now you're on federal property. That's even more secure, if you like.
Ooh, very
Right?
wise.
Right. So
Very
things
wise.
things like that, those
Interesting.
little tips that you
Yeah.
can think of to protect yourself. And obviously, if you're unsure of an area, you don't bring a map and stand on the street corner. I mean, you know more about this from New York and everything. And you can spot a tourist. They're the ones looking up or looking down at their map, right? You
Yeah.
walk with confidence, you put your shoulders back, you just stride as though you own the place. And that
Yes.
that can take a little bit of doing, but once your brain doesn't know, it's a bit like laughing. You can teach yourself to laugh even if you're not feeling, in a great mood, but your brain doesn't know that it's fake. You know what I mean? It just, you take over that aura. And again, if you just put your shoulders back that 2 millimeters, chest out, face up, and you walk like you own the place,
Right.
be amazed how A, the confidence it gives you, and B, how people think, well, that person knows where they're going, and leave them alone.
So, as we get to the end here, because you did give us a lot of tips and tricks, I would love to talk about our class that you're going to do for Covey Club, which I'm really excited about,
Yeah,
which is called Saving Money by Traveling the World as a Volunteer. So, talk a little bit about that and what people will learn. You don't have to tell us what it is, but like
sure.
what it is. If anybody listening who wants to come, please come. You can sign up through the show notes. We'll have a link in there, or go to coveyclub.com. But what is the sort of idea behind it?
Well, the premise of it is to reinvent yourself through travel. And I'm going to show you ways where you can do it very economically, through volunteering, and then have another couple of options that you could do where you're actually not volunteering, but you're housed and you can, take care of your own food when you're living in a location and not be in a hotel all the time. So we've lots of little tips and tricks and all of that. About 3 different blocks on how you can travel and be safe and do it very economically and go anywhere you want in the world.
Awesome. And especially as an older woman, which is, we have the opportunity. Why not take charge of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if you don't have responsibilities. Like one of the things when I found out I wasn't going to be able to have children with the previous marriage, it was devastating for me at the time. I always wanted to be a mother and all that good stuff. But then what I had to do is readjust my thinking. And I said, okay, well, what is it I can do that women with child rearing responsibilities cannot do? And that was like long-term kind of travel, which is what I'm doing. So a
That's
lot of
right.
times when we come up to against some kind of block, if you can flip it on its head and say, okay, either A, what is the gift in this for me? And if you can't find a gift, and
I like that.
sometimes it's
Right.
tough.
Right.
If you can't find the gift, look for the lesson because these things are being presented to us for a reason, to learn
Love
and to
that.
grow. So
What
yeah,
is
there's
the
times when
gift?
I look for the gift and I go, I don't find a gift right now. And
Not
I go, okay,
finding that
yeah,
gift.
not getting
Okay.
it right. So yeah,
Okay.
well, there must be a lesson here.
Yes. No. And I had my very first therapist, I had a very mean first stepmother. I had two stepmothers, and she was British and really mean and self centered. And I remember him saying to me, someday this is going to serve you. Someday then I'd be like, yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And then
yeah.
I was working at Vogue magazine, and Anna Winter came in, replacing a very American editor. And the minute that she walked in the door, I was like, I know you.
I got you. Yeah.
I know you. I know how you think. I know I had somebody just
Mhm.
like you I grew up with, and I was like, damn, he was right.
Yeah, yeah,
Like I
and
totally
it can take a
understood her.
while, can't it? It can take a while. You don't ne It doesn't necessarily show up the next day,
Oh
you
no, this
know?
was years later. This is
Exactly,
years later, years
exactly,
later.
exactly,
I mean, I
and
thought he was crazy, but yes,
yeah, and that's why that's it for me, that's another way of living without regret, because if you look back, yes, I've had dark periods, we all have dark periods, we've had
that's
grief,
right.
we've got stuff to overcome, and yet I wouldn't, looking back, change any of that because it's made me who I am today,
Beautiful.
living through those experiences.
Beautiful. Just quickly, let's just say what the book is, and so that people know ahead of time.
Sure, it's called Following Sunshine, a voyage around the mind, around the world, around the heart.
And what is that about?
That is my memoir. That's my story. A bit of what we've been talking about today. Around the mind is really overcoming some childhood stuff and growing up in Ireland, the daughter of actor parents. And then
Wow.
around the world is that year I spent volunteering around the world. And then around the heart is from the moment I step on the sailboat and my life just blossomed.
I love that. I
Yeah,
love that
yeah.
chance meeting, and I
Mhm.
love the story. So wonderful to have you, and I'm so glad we met. I can't wait to see your class. That's really exciting. I hope everybody listening will come.
Yes, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
So I hope this was inspirational for you. If it was, I hope that you'll follow the podcast. I hope you'll check out coveyclub.com. We have so much for you. If you are serious about your reinvention, don't do what I did and try to do it all by yourself. Come join Covey Club as a member. We are women like me who are out there trying to help you reinvent yourself. Yes, there are women out there who want to put themselves out there for you, and you put yourself out there for them, and we do it together. It is much easier, much better. And strangely, it's really wonderful doing it with people you've never met before. It's really shocking, but it works. So I hope you will join us. Check out Covey Club. Give us a review if you like the podcast, and please share it with other friends who need some reinvention help, as that is how we get out there and people hear more about us. Thanks for joining, and I will see you next time.